Hello gamers, it's Nyce, and I hope everyone excited to choose their class in MMO Ashes of Creation is having a nice day. Today we will give a detailed breakdown of the 8 archetypes in Ashes of Creation and discuss the 64 class system with everything we know so far. Ashes of Creation is a highly ambitious MMO with many intricate and innovative systems that has MMO players excited. But one of the most enticing things about it is the 64 class system. There will be timestamps in the description below for your convenience if you want to view a specific archetype or want to return to a portion of the video later due to this being a very long video. Before we discuss the 64 classes of Ashes of Creation, or AOC as I'll be referring to it as, we must first understand how the class system works. MMO Ashes of Creation has 8 base archetypes you can choose from. You can choose one of these archetypes upon creating your character. This will be known as our primary archetype. This establishes the core identity of your character and is very important as it cannot be changed. The 8 primary archetypes are Fighter, Tank, Ranger, Mage, Cleric, Rogue, Summoner, and the Bard. We'll detail each of these archetypes in this video, but what is exciting is that at some point throughout the leveling process, currently level 25, you get to choose a secondary archetype. Your primary archetype plus your secondary archetype determines your class. 8 primaries, 8 secondaries, thus 64 different class options. Makes sense now, right? This 8x8 chart here shows it best. You can indeed choose to double down on the same archetype with your secondary archetype choice. For example, a mage can go mage or pure mage and become the arc wizard class. Or instead decide to be a mage fighter to become a battle mage, where maybe they choose to instead perhaps use a melee weapon while dishing out their spells. Each archetype can use each weapon, so this will be possible. Your secondary class can be changed if you decide you do not like it. It is, once again, important to remind ourselves that your primary archetype is the most important as it cannot change. Your secondary archetype will not provide you with new active skills, but rather augments the skills of the first archetype for a new effect. For example, the fighter's blitz will probably turn into a blink as a spell sword because they chose mage as their secondary, or maybe this gap closer will deal an AoE shock damage explosion upon arrival at the target. The augment system can be quite game changing. The primary archetypes will definitely have a unique feel and identity from each other, but allowing players to further get a sense of class identity with the choice of a secondary archetype will be the true accomplishment of class fantasy in Ashes of Creation. Now that we've established what the 64 class system is, we'll discuss each archetype. We won't be going over each skill of each archetype in this video. We'll of course discuss some, but we'll save the detailed breakdowns for a later video. Before we get into that, please consider liking the video as it helps more people to find it. Also, consider subscribing if you have not yet. This video is a much more updated version of the one I did last year. Thank you to everyone who decided to support by becoming a YouTube channel member and Twitch subs here on screen. Be sure to follow us on Twitch. Links for all of these will be in the description. Keep in mind that some of the footage shown was taken at different stages of development, and this MMO is still a work in progress. So if the tank stream looks a little bit different than the fighter stream, which is a little bit more recent, or the bard stream, then you understand why. Now let's begin. The fighter. The fighter archetype, in my opinion, had the best archetype showcase in Ashes of Creation, and best showcases the hybrid combat in this MMO. This is your standard fighter, warrior / brawler archetype you've seen in most MMOs. The fighter archetype has some anti-heal, some dots, some incredible mobility to close gaps between you and the opponent, and just seems to be really mobile. Fighters play as a mobile martial DPS, up close and doing damage. Fighters have an archetype-specific resource called momentum. Archetype-specific resources truly create a unique feel when behind the keyboard and add to that unique archetype identity. You gain momentum for dealing damage and at the end of a basic weapon attack combo. Over time, it ramps up, gaining more and more momentum the more you have. The archetype seems to make you truly feel like a juggernaut. This plays great into the class fantasy of a berserker or unstoppable wrecking ball on the battlefield. The fighter has 3 forms, each which determines the bonus that momentum is applying. Each form grants a maximum stat bonus of plus 20% to various stats. You have movement speed in form of celerity, attack speed and form of ferocity, which includes the casting speed of skills, and lastly, form of fluidity, which grants a max plus 40% disable resistance chance, greatly reducing your odds of getting CC'd. The fighter's kit is centered around big bursts of physical damage as well as tripping, shaking, and wounding enemies, making them vulnerable by reducing the effectiveness of healing and increasing damage. A really tanky damage dealer. The fighter has plenty of cool skills like the gap closer and blitz.
Ooh. Oh man, now that is cool.
But I think the rupture ability is my favorite. It's another way to lock down your opponent and pressure runners as it deals physical damage and applies a debuff to the target. While that debuff is active, the target acquires 5 wound stacks per second if they are moving. After 5 seconds, the target takes heavy damage plus additional damage for each stack of wound it has, so if someone's constantly kiting you or trying to run away from your pressure, they will get punished for trying to do so. The fighter classes are Weapon Master, Dreadnought, Shadow Blade, Hunter, Spell Sword, Blade Caller, High Sword, and Blade Dancer. The fighter will definitely be an archetype I play. I'm actually stuck between this archetype and our next one, the tank. The tank archetype excels in the tank role as you'd expect. A tank's role is to control a fight, grab attention of enemies so they're the focus of attention, mitigate incoming damage for self and allies, CC, and support. Any class with tank as the primary will be viable for tanking raids, dungeons, and world bosses and be good in PvP encounters. Ashes has a traditional threat mechanic. With this in mind, the tank's kit has a lot of skills that straight out generate threat and keep it without needing to be the highest DPS. Remember that healing and damage dealing each create threat. The tank's archetype resource is courage. It is acquired as you take damage. One way to spend courage is with the grit ability, a toggleable ability that reduces incoming damage by a significant amount, but also lowers the caster's movement speed and outgoing damage. I feel this provides a very fun skill ceiling with tanks. The tank archetype is of course filled with ways to support and protect allies. Standard abilities that you expect are here, such as your standard pull ability and grapple, which also has a snare. You also have an awesome ability in Aegis, which will dispel negative effects on you while creating a protective dome behind you. This dome transfers 50% of all damage dealt to allies to you instead, whilst providing status effect resistances. This is a dangerous move, so it's best to use with high courage stacks and the previously mentioned ability known as grit to increase your mitigation so you're not taking in too much. This will be quite a useful skill in PvP as most PvE situations have you wanting allies opposite of you with the boss facing you. I can see this being really good for pushing the main door of a keep, charging in while your allies swarm in behind you. There's plenty of cool abilities, but the best to me is the tank wall, which we saw most recently. This can be placed strategically to obstruct movement and block projectiles. There may even be walls that allow allies to shoot through the wall while still blocking projectiles of enemies. It is a physical object, so it could act as a portable line of sight, if you will. It's really good at choke points. Remember that Ashes of Creation features an active block and stamina bar. The tank archetype is one that many will go for. It will not rival the DPS of other archetypes, but just like Cleric, if you spec for it, it may be able to hold its own DPS wise. The tank classes are Knight, Guardian, Knight Shield, Warden, Spell Shield, Keeper, Paladin, and Argent. The Ranger. Rangers are the ranged physical DPS archetype. This archetype has a lot of skills needing a bow equipped, whereas most active skills of other archetypes aren't this way. MMO Ashes of Creation allows characters to have a melee slot main hand and offhand, and a range slot, so essentially this won't be a huge issue. You can also choose which slot will be your basic attacks.
So I have here now a reticle on my screen. So we've switched from tab target mode, which is a point and click with the cursor or using tab to cycle targets based on proximity priority, right? And into this reticle based mode, which now you can see the targeting plate in the top is slightly grayed out. And we do that to demonstrate that that is a soft lock target versus a hard lock target.
The class design of Ranger keeps them highly mobile and slippery, and the Ranger Showcase was by far one of the best as well. We first got to look at this sick camouflage ability in the PvP Caravan Showcase, which made this group of Rangers tough to see at a distance, allowing for an ambush with the snipe ability. They additionally have a disengaged backflip, snares, rooting vines, and traps, like you expect the fantasy of a Ranger to have. One thing I personally love about the direction Intrepid Studios has taken with the Ranger is that it's not tied to pets like some other MMOs. They're not just a nature bow guy, which I find really cool. The dynamics of the Ranger's kit comes from their ammo types, hunts, and marks. Hunts are self-buff cast on the Ranger. Hunt of the Bear increases your physical mitigation. Hunt of the Raven grants physical penetration. And Hunt of the Tiger increases your critical damage. Marks are debuffs cast on the enemy. Mark of the Bear can make them more vulnerable to damage. Mark of the Tiger, more likely to sustain critical hits, and Raven will deal more bonus damage the lower health they have. We'll go over these in more detail soon come Alpha 2, so be sure to be subscribed. But the Ranger's kit is very versatile. The airstrike skill is one of the best skills I've seen in MMOs. This skill was already great when we first saw it back in the ranged weapons showcase, but they've made changes to allow your character to be controlled mid-air. That's right, they somehow made this skill even cooler. And these damage shots immobilize your target, further helping you make even more distance as you flip away from them or towards them. Take a look at how it can allow you to traverse different elevations and cover distance other archetypes might struggle with. The Ranger classes are Strider, Sentinel, Scout, Hawkeye, Scion, Falconer, Soulbow, and Bowsinger. The Mage. Mages pull from the life force of the universe that bridges the realms known as Essence. This is your traditional mage or wizard caster you've seen before. The magic DPS with control over the elements is just a classic, needing minimal innovation here. The power of the mage manifests in its power to wield the elements and magic. Mage will be the primary range DPS class, although it should be able to be pretty flexible in order to be melee. A mage's dynamic gameplay with casting comes from a skill called Elemental Empowerment. While active, when casting a spell with an elemental effect, your wand's basic wand combos will now apply stacks of the given element. There's even a dope visual representation of this. The mage comes with cool abilities you expect like Blink, which helps you make distance and can be casted mid-air like a lot of abilities. A standard damage shield, which you'll want to time well, and the Ball Lightning, which has gone through plenty of visual reworks to look as good as it does now. One of the coolest displays of innovation comes in the form of this ability that actually has smart tracking and can go around obstacles, ignoring the line of sight very strategically.
Let me get behind this rock. Oops, sorry guys. I'll launch around this area here. Oh, that looked so good. Did you guys see that arc? That was so cool.
All hacks.
Now that's a really cool feature. Here's it being used in the recent Node War showcase to actually go around that tank wall ability that we discussed earlier. The Mage is just a classic of the MMO genre and thus will see a lot of playtime. The Mage classes are Battle Mage, Spellstone, Shadowcaster, Beastmaster, Spell Hunter, Arc Wizard, Warlock, Acolyte, and Sorcerer. The Cleric. Only primary healers in Ashes of Creation. They will be essential to most group compositions and provide a healer support role. No archetype will be able to fulfill the role of a healer the way a cleric can. Cleric's archetype resource is Divine Power. This resource regenerates based on how much healing and damage you've done. So you can only build this during the heat of combat, and that's only effective healing, so you can't overheal to get this. Divine Power may have some more pending uses, but appears to be consumed in order to instantly cast a skill. The amount of resources consumed is proportional to the time left to finish casting. Most healing spells seem to have a long cast time, and often you might be in a panic situation situation, so the utility here is obvious. Intrepid appears to have balanced things in a smart cast time to effectiveness ratio. A small solo target heal will likely let you stay mobile and cast instantly, whereas a powerful burst heal, especially an AoE one, may cause the character to slightly slow down, have a channel time, or make you completely stagnant. The cleric archetype had a great showcase which showed off various healing skills with actual dynamic gameplay. Reticle targeting AoE heals were cool to see. But the coolest in my opinion was this gap closer heal, which healed the ally upon arrival and brought you to them to better provide support.
Heroes never die.
I can see this being used mid-combat. You see someone's really low and you want to give them more heals, so you get close towards them and start putting your AoE hots down. This was even casted mid-air, which is pretty sick.
Wait, here it is. Boom!
Oh, yeah. Let's
that
get
was
these zombies.
great.
The cleric will likely be a popular archetype, being that it is the healer, of course, but I can foresee it being a desired secondary archetype to provide self-healing, which will be very good, especially in PvP engagements. Just like the tank DPS, it's been said that a DPS cleric will be viable, so we'll see. The cleric classes are Templar, Apostle, Shadow Disciple, Protector, Oracle, Shaman, High Priest, and Scryer. The Rogue. The Rogue is a master of opportunity, typically known for stealth and dishing out big bursts of damage in a short window. The Rogue is typically known as the assassin archetype in games, playing into that stealthy fantasy of players. The Rogue is such a unique gameplay style, which makes it very popular. The Rogue is predicted to have true stealth, unlike the Ranger with its camouflage. Thus, the Rogue will be tough for you to see, and I mean really tough for players to see at the launch of Alpha 2.
I can give some unfortunate news that the Rogue will likely not be available at the start of Alpha 2. I know.
So, as you heard from the AMA that I participated in, at the time of this video, we do not have rogue footage as they will not be available for the launch of Alpha 2. But we do have some information. Archetypes in Ashes of Creation have been said to have utility skills. In the case of the rogue, they provide solid utility by excelling at delving the deepest dungeons and finding the most hidden of treasures. Dungeons and Ashes of Creation have hidden door and trap mechanics, so you'll probably want/need a rogue in your party. Rogue will be the fastest class. Being patient as they await their chance to strike from the shadows will be rewarded, I imagine. I expect most rogues to excel at ganks, executes, and maybe they're squishy to provide a more get in and get out style of combat. I imagine rogue is one of the fastest paced classes as well. We'll provide more information on a rogue as it becomes available, so make sure you're subscribed, and I know a lot of you were disappointed to learn that it won't be here at Alpha 2 launch. The rogue classes are Duelist, Shadow Guardian, Assassin, Predator, Night Spell, Shadow Lord, Cultist, and Charlatan. The Summoner. The Summoner is another archetype that we do not have an archetype showcase for at the time of this video. The Summoner archetype will likely be the last to be introduced. Summoners are deemed an archetype that can be the jack of all trades and can shift their roles to easily fill in the gaps of a group's composition based on the role of the summon they are utilizing, coupled with their choice of a secondary archetype, which influences the role that the summons perform best at. In theory, the Summoner will be the most solo-friendly archetype, though one may be able to debate that it could be the Cleric. The Summoner may function like traditional pet classes we've seen in previous MMOs. Personally, I'd like to see a Summoner similar to the Necromancer of Guild Wars 2 and combine the use of permanent active pets with active skills or temporary summons as well. Maybe we can have a tanky summon that will provide mitigation to you by absorbing 15% of damage dealt to you until it runs out of its health and then dies as it builds threat whilst out. Maybe summoning a creature that occasionally heals you for a small amount but can be sacrificed for a large burst heal that puts it on a cooldown. The amount of DPS summons available would be, in theory, plenty. Most of the information on the Summoner archetype hasn't been confirmed in a while, but it has a lot of high potential. In my opinion, the secondary archetype choice will be insanely important for the Summoner as the primary. The augments added from your class choice can very well make the Summoner a fantasy Swiss army knife. Will going Summoner tank make you able to tank in-game dungeons better than a pure tank? Nah, probably not. But being able to slot certain skills to fill in certain roles will make this archetype very fun to theory craft with, provide build diversity, and make you second guess your traditional group composition. The summoner classes are Wildblade, Brood Warden, Shadowmancer, Beastmaster, Spellmancer, Conjurer, Necromancer, and Enchanter. The Bard. The Bard. The Bard archetype is one of the most exciting offerings Ashes of Creation is bringing to the table, and it's not often seen in modern MMOs. Bards fill a non-healing support role that makes the party better as a whole through a range of buff-oriented abilities. It has some healing in its kit, but that's not the main focus. Most skills are proximity-based for the Bard to inspire their party members, and there's also some single-target buffs as well. The Bard has its own identity apart from the Cleric, as the Bard may have some heals over time, but the Cleric will be your king of burst heal still.
Yeah, so it's a little bit slower healing.
Cool, very cool. So obviously we're keeping that burst healing towards the Cleric. Those are the people who are going to be able to actually sustain you in a pinch or through significant damage received, whereas the Bard is an augment to that and empowers the Cleric's ability to kind of confer those effects on the party.
Most MMOs lack a Bard and double down on the Holy Trinity. In Ashes of Creation, it seems a Bard may be just as mandatory and impactful as the Cleric archetype, especially if you don't have a Cleric already in party. And thus, we may need to call it the Holy Square, if you will. But that's not as catchy. The Bard isn't to be viewed as just a buff bot, and its class identity comes from storytelling, singing, and dancing in combat. Bard abilities can be mostly found in the categories of melodies, dances, and stories. Melody abilities are persistent AoE buffs and debuffs. Melodies can be played concurrently with other abilities. For example, Cheerful Melody increases your healing received by 20%, and this is for you and your party members, and then also has a 15% strength heal over time every 2 seconds. Then you have Pensive Melody, increases mana regeneration rate. This is going to be one of the biggest, utilities of the Bard archetype, is making sure everyone has really good mana sustain, which is going to be very important. You have Epic Melody, which increases movement speed by 20%. Cathartic Melody, with a 25% chance for your party to heal themselves for 50% of the damage. Think of it as like an AoE lifesteal buff, basically. Then you have the debuff ones like Menacing Melody, which increases damage taken for enemies by 10%. And these are just the melodies. The Bard has some cool mobility with the Flourish skill, which has no collision and also allows you to turn your character while you're doing this.
The effects for this.
Yeah, it looks pretty exciting. But yeah, so it's a great ability, like, especially as you see later, the next group of abilities we're getting into are the dance abilities. And this move combos really well with those because it lets you get into position to do the dances. It also lets you, get out of dodge, like you were saying, or you can also use it to like slide through enemies too. It turns off your collision so you can not get blocked or trapped.
You have your dances, which have less range than melodies, typically at 5 meters. And you got things like Shield Dance, which has a heal over time and a damage shield, a very cool animation that allows you to move while channeling. Probably my favorite dance shown of the Bard archetype. And don't get it twisted, Bard doesn't lack CCs or an offensive kit. A Bard can use Mesmerin Dance, as it's a cool dance that can stun the opponent. You have other dances that do AoE damage. You have some skills that do knockback. A Bard isn't really just put into one category, it seems. Some skills even have different effects depending on whether you're targeting an ally or an enemy. And you got stuff like the story skill called Conflict, which increases physical attack power. Bards appear to be the most intricate archetypes thus far, and there will definitely be a high skill ceiling separating your average Bard from the rock stars, as it would seem. The Bard classes are Telsword, Siren, Trickster, Song Warden, Magician, Songcaller, Soul Weaver, and the Pure Bard, a Minstrel. And that is the 64 classes of Ashes of Creation. Let me know what class you may choose, and if you aren't sure, then which archetype suits you best. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed. Please consider subscribing and liking the video, as this one truly took a lot of work to put together for you guys. Also, I'd like to thank the Varan News Network for helping us with this video. You'll find a link to their channel in the description as well if you're interested in ongoing news occurring in-game. Don't forget to give us a follow on Twitch and sign up for Ashes of Creation in the description. If you're interested in more Ashes of Creation content, be sure to check out the playlist you see here on screen for more videos, or go to the official Ashes of Creation channel linked in the description. It's been nice.